Hey there gamers, welcome back to the Board Game Co channel, and this is a preview of A Song of Ice and Fire Tactics. Welcome back to the Board Game Co channel. I am Professor Mag, and this is A Song in Ice and Fire Tactics Battle for the Trident. It's houses Baratheon and Targaryen by CMON Games, and it's currently on GameFound. You can find the link down below, but this is a current project, and this is also a sponsored preview. Please keep in mind this is a prototype, so it's currently in its prototype phase. Everything is subject to change, but with that, we are going to get into this, because A Song in Ice and Fire Tactics takes the world of the novels of George R.R. Martin, and it makes these smaller scenario-based skirmish games where it is more personal. You have these smaller warbands that you're working with, and you're moving across the board, fighting for the most victory points. There are sometimes different objectives as well, but you're basically moving around the board using your different miniatures that you have chosen and personally made your team of your people that you are choosing to use between your heroes, champions, and soldiers, and then you are just trying to outwit your opponent within the battlefield. Now, before we get started, there are a few special things that I want to note right off of the bat. One thing is that the rulebook refers to the game as Song Tactics to shorthand it, so that's what I'm going to be using going forward. So if you hear me say in Song Tactics, I am referring to A Song of Ice and Fire Tactics Battle for the Trident. Also, on top of that, I have a scenario set up here, but the miniatures that are on the board are not realistic whatsoever. There's actually going to be a playthrough on the Board Game Co channel between Alex and I, so please check that out. But that is why this is not set up the way it should be intended, because I didn't want to have any advantage over Alex when we are playing in the game. So that being said, for this preview, this is much more of a true preview where I am showing you everything that comes with the game. I am going to be going over how everything works and how the things interact with each other, but just keep in mind this is many more miniatures than you would normally have on the board. This is not how you would spawn from the beginning. This is more as you've been moving around a bit, and these cards are just kind of spread out for display, and I will be going over them, but when we are actually playing, we will have our different factions set up on our different sides, and we will be playing against each other. Now, for those of you that are a fan of Game of Thrones, this is that epic moment when the Targaryens are fighting against the Baratheons. King Aerys is still king. He is becoming the Mad King and getting more and more mad, so people are starting to rise up and rebel against him. Now, there are some houses, like I said, we haven't seen, such as the Lannisters, which also have involvement, but the Baratheons, along with the Starks and some other houses, are starting to rebel against the Targaryens, and those are the different scenarios that we're seeing here. This is long before Arya Stark was even born. This is when her father, Eddard Stark, was a young lad, and he's actually a a champion that you were able to play with. Our heroes are Robert Baratheon and Rhaegar Targaryen, which absolutely makes sense, and we will see how that plays out, because it's certainly going to be different from the novels, and different factions can win. Now, this game is a scenario-based game, so you will be playing specific scenarios and setting that up every time you go to play the game. This means that it told me specifically which tiles to place and what overlay tiles to place as well. We'll go over what some of them do, but there are things such as trees, which block your walking as well as your line of sight, and there are some that will do damage, such as these spike traps, and there are other things such as walls, which can also provide protection for players. All of that is in the scenario setup, as well as the number of rounds which you'll be playing. For this one, for example, you are set up with 6 rounds, and there's a turn marker to make sure that every player has gone. The scenario setup also tells you how many rounds will be played. So, for example, this scenario would be played over 6 rounds, and there are no special objectives, which means that the game is only won when the 6 rounds are over, or, as I'm sure you've guessed, if all of the opponent's miniatures are wiped off the board, if all of them are killed, you would also win the game and score additional VP for the remaining rounds. Another thing that the scenario setup tells you is where your starting space will be for your different war bonds, so you would be in a specific section where you are able to summon all of your miniatures. Whoever is determined to be the first player will choose their option if they want to choose where they are beginning, or if they want to choose who starts first, and then the other player will then make the other choices. But the most important thing that the scenario sheet provides for you is your starting warbands. So the most important thing that you will be using in this game are these coins. There are the gold dragons, the silver stags, and the copper stars. And they are money, but they also represent different things. So you are able to have heroes, champions, and soldiers within your warbands, and the starting coins are going to be how many of those you're able to bring into the battle. So for example, this scenario starts with only 2 gold coins. If you have a 2 available to you, you're able to choose as many heroes as you are able to afford. For example, Robert Baratheon here costs 2, so I would only be able to afford him, and any that you have left over you are able to spend during the scenario for certain things, but you initially want to be spending them to build up your different warbands. The silver coins are spent the same way. You can use them for things in the future during the actual gameplay throughout the rounds, but you are using them to build up your beginning arsenal for the warbands that you will be summoning, and you will be using these for soldiers as well. Now, the copper stars do come back to you every round, whereas the silver and gold coins that you spend round over round, any that are spent are immediately lost, whereas your copper coins will come back round over round because that's how you track which unit you've moved. Now let's go over the back and forth of the turn structure because you will be using those coins to track which miniatures have moved. So whoever is the starting player will activate their miniature first. They can choose whoever they want to activate and they will get 2 action points. Action points can be spent for different things, but first I'll go over the phases of how the round looks, and you will spend those 2 action points, and then your opponent will then get to activate one of their miniatures. Now every time you activate a miniature, you use one of those copper coins from your supply and you place it near the miniature that you activated. This is going to let everyone in play know exactly which miniatures have been activated and which ones still have yet to move, because the round will end when all miniatures have been activated. As I said, you have the 6 rounds in this particular scenario, so you know that you can move each miniature, you can activate them for a total of 6 times, so you'll be keeping track of that with the different tokens, and when the round ends, you will collect them all to be able to track for the next round. Now, you may lose some units. You will be able to collect these back to spend on future abilities as well, and some of them definitely will spend some of these, so that is an option for you as well. You're also able to spend these before activating your other miniatures, so you may choose to spend some for your abilities, opting to not even activate some of your other miniatures because you wanted to spend these coins. Now we're going to go over all of the cards in a second, what they look like, the different abilities that they have, and what combat looks like. But before they do that, one other thing that you're able to do when you're building up your warbands with your starting coins that you have is you're able to purchase equipment. Equipment you attach to specific heroes, and you are able to use that to have it give them a specific benefit, and that's something that you're just able to pay for if you'd like to do it at the beginning of the game. So you can see that we have our different equipments here. There are things such as Lucky Charm and Pristine Boots. And just to give you an example of what they do, Lucky Charm is once per game, discard this card before rolling any dice for this model. You may change the result die of a 1 to a 10. So that is a way that you can mitigate and make your dice much better. You are working with d10s, so a 10 is the best result possible that you can have, and a 10 is also a natural 10, which gives you special added benefits depending on what the check is that you're rolling for. So needless to say, that is a very good effect and a reason why you may want to purchase different equipments at the beginning of the game as well. Now to go over the different cards that you have for your miniatures, you have soldiers, champions, and heroes. Now your soldiers will only cost you these silver star coins, whereas your champions will cost you your silver stags and potentially some copper stars, and your heroes will cost you your gold dragons and potentially other coins as well, but that's how you know if you have a hero. Now, you are able to have a mounted hero, so there's Robert Baratheon mounted as well as regular Robert Baratheon, and they have different costs and, of course, different abilities and things like that. You're only able to have one of these in play as they are the same character, so even if you could afford both of them for a particular scenario, you're only able to take one of them in because they are named the same. Now, looking through their cards, you can tell that I have yellow and red. There's our Baratheon House Sigil, and there's also our Targaryen House Sigil. That's what you can tell the different factions that they're a part of, and you can only play with characters from your faction. Then, looking down the cards, they have different symbols on them. These little daggers are your melee attacks, which means that those characters have melee attacks that they're able to do when they're adjacent to an enemy. There are also ranged attacks. Ranged attacks are able to do if you have a line of sight between you and an enemy and no walls between you. You also have ongoing abilities like the Warden of the Stag, which are ongoing abilities which would add defense for the different friendly heroes around them for certain roles. There are also different movement abilities, etc., but all of these different heroes, champions, and soldiers have abilities that you are able to utilize and spend your coins on to perhaps make them even better. Some of them will cost you coins straight out the gate, but the majority of them will cost you 1 action point. Some of them may cost you 2 action points, but it is most typical to have 1 action point per action, and you will gain 2 every time you activate a miniature. There are some rare cases where you can have 3 action points, however 3 is the maximum that you can have, and you can only ever be reduced down to 1 action point, which means you can never be brought to 0 and you can always use 1. When attacking, as I said, it is a D10 system, so the majority of the time you'll be told to grab a certain number of D10s. For example, this attack here is 2, and its successes are on a 7+, so you would grab 2 of your D10s and roll them, and if I had a 7+, that would be a success, but I actually got 0. Now, if I did get 1 success, if the opponent had any defense ability, they're then able to roll their defense dice, and if they got a success, which this one is a 6+, he would have 1 defense, and he would be able to block that damage as well. They have their different health values, so you can see that they can only take so much damage. For example, this guy is only worth 2, and once they meet the ultimate damage, they are then killed for the battle. Players are also able to interact with different things, such as breaking down doors and interacting with these items. You can see that there's a letter here and a coin purse, so if these doors were forced open, then players would be able to go into these little cubbies and get the different benefits from those items. You can also see that there are these objective rings here. That's going to be the majority of where you are scoring your VP. Any miniature that ends the round on top of an objective is going to score 1 victory point. So if our white team did happen to have 2, if our Baratheons had 2 on here, they would score 2 victory points at the end of the round. However, if it was tied, then the Targaryens and the Baratheons would each gain a victory point. This is how you will slowly gain in victory points, and you will just take these tokens to track that, and the most victory points at the end of the game, once everything is totaled, is how you will know who the winner is. There are also agendas and objectives that players will be able to use to score additional VP at the end of the game as well, or throughout the game. For example, there are these agendas here, and this one is Personal Report. At the end of the game, have none of your heroes killed or captured to score 2 VP. Another one would be Master of Coin, which you would do during the game, which is reveal this card if you spend all of your silver stat coin before your opponent to score 2 VP. So different things will trigger at different points, and there are also these objectives which will add different things to you that you are able to use. Now, there are, as I said, the different things that you'll spend your action points on, such as 1 action point here or 2 for threaten, but there are also free actions that you'll gain as well. You're able to play 1 free action per turn, and they will cost the 0 AP for you, and you can see that this one would be pay 3 copper stars to gain 1 AP this turn. So this is a way that you could gain an extra AP if you had the additional coin, but as I said, you would cap yourself out as 3. Now, what would Game of Thrones be without motivations? A game about political power, it just wouldn't make sense unless these different characters that you know from the books and love have different motivations for why they're here and why they're deciding to help and what they want to get from it. So whether they're alive or if they die throughout the game, they will have these motivations that add an extra level of what they want and what will be happening in the game as well. Those will be represented by these cards over here, and you can see that there is a different side for the alive and for the dead side. So, for example, here we have Jon Arryn, and he is wishing for summer. At the start of the game, your opponent declares 2 nemesises in your warband. For 1 gold coin, when one of these nemesises is attacked but not killed, score 1 VP, and for 2 gold coins, at the end of the game, if both nemesises are on the battlefield, score 5 VP. So this is a reason why he may want nemesises but have them want to stay alive while he is trying to battle them on the battlefield. But if Jon Arryn passes away, summer is gone. Your opponent scores 2 VP for each killed nemesis chosen from this motivation unless you spend 2 gold. So you can see that these different motivations are going to be other ways that you will be spending your gold that you gain throughout the game, and a lot of that is going to be a tactical decision of when you are spending your resources, what you are choosing to do, and how you are maneuvering around the board, trying to both get to the different objective points to score VP, but also trying to wipe out the most formidable characters that are on the other side of the board coming at you. Now, when characters are engaged in battle, there is also, as I said, a natural crit if you roll a 10. If you do that, you get an extra damage as well, which just makes me happy. I feel like that should be called the Meg rule. They didn't consult me on it, but doing extra damage just for getting a critical is absolutely beautiful and very thematic for something like Game of Thrones. Now, this is currently on GameFound. You can check out the link down below, but one final thing I want to tell you about is there is a Drogon miniature. It's Drogon sitting on top of Harrenhal, and that I believe is going to be a different playable scenario. This is the only scenario that I was able to check out and see, but it is a GameFound exclusive. You can check out their page down below. I highly suggest just checking everything out because a giant dragon miniature is just so wonderful, but it's Drogon. So, you know, you want to see him on top of Harrenhal and hopefully not fight him. I'm not sure what will happen there, but I guess we'll see. Now, as a reminder, this is not a true setup, but if you would like to see one, Alex and I will be doing a playthrough here on the Board Game Co. channel, so please stay tuned for that. If you want to turn on your bell notifications so that you can be notified when that video goes live, that's something you may or may not choose to do. As a reminder, this is a sponsored preview. Thank you very much to CMON Games for letting us go over A Song of Ice and Fire Tactics Battle for the Trident, House Baratheon versus House Targaryen. I'm very excited to see what other houses are added to this. Let's see some Lannisters, and we will go from there. I hope you guys have a great day. This has been a Board Game Co. preview, and I will see you next time.